Hey, welcome to Dan's Model Works. And it is part two and should be the conclusion, because how difficult could this thing be, of our Dodge Grand Caravan. And this is the third generation Caravan. And I have just a minutes ago wrapped up editing the MI10 video. And that definitely went a little longer than I had planned. So this one is going to be a little bit later than I planned. I will say that I've really been pleasantly surprised at how well received part one was. As a matter of fact, it's the first video I've put up that did more than 500 views in the first week. Usually it's more like, well, if it's a dog of a video, it's maybe 110. Usually it's more like 200 plus in the first week. This one did over 500 in the first week, so we will see how it does. So let's get this box out of the way. And you can see we're starting to work on the exterior. I've already cleaned up basically the molding gates down here. Otherwise, it's a nice clean body. There's almost no problems like any mold lines or anything that had to be taken off of it. So the next step for this is going to be some primer, basically some gray automotive primer. Because as we all know, red is a really nasty color to paint over. And this is actually going to end up being a metallic blue. Okay, there we've got our external color done. And I did have a choice. Basically, I think there was two main ways that this generation of Caravan was painted. Either the rub strip here was painted black, and the bumpers, front and back, were painted black, along with the door handles, or everything was painted body color with only a minimum amount of accents. So I thought about it, and I didn't really care for the black bumpers, so that means that my rub strip here is going to be body color as well. Although I'm pretty sure there should still be some black trim around right here, and I believe at the bottom of the windshield. I will be checking that. Now on the inside, you can see that the paint is still a little bit wet. I need one more coat. I've painted this the same color that I painted the seat fabric. And furthermore, our transparency here, I've added some color here. Basically, I painted just a line here, the ceiling color, and then the pillars themselves, especially the A pillars and the B, C, D pillars here, they were painted the same color as the dashboard was, because that would be that kind of hard plastic in those places right there. Something I should have caught before, but I didn't notice until I was painting some of the trim work, is this seam right there and there. It's actually a mold line. Of course, on the real car, this is all a one-piece plastic molding, and those lines should not be there. So I'm going to have to scrape that off and retouch the paint. A little bit of a pain. Medfield School for the Gifted, I guess. So there's the seam addressed. Now all I have to do is touch up the paint. So this is the cup holder. And other than painting, you can tell it's finished because I've already dropped it on the floor 3 times. Before I paint it, there's the cup holders installed. All I did was I just scraped off the paint from the front of the piece of trim where the cup holder comes out of, and I just glued it directly to that, and the front piece here is actually going to be that trim piece when I'm done painting it. So in theory, you've just watched a slideshow of me, the steps that it took to make the child safety seat here. And if you're wondering about the god-awful purple color, that was deliberate, mainly because very, very few people actually buy their child safety seat stuff that's going to absolutely match the car. And if you're like me, you were just glad to get this stuff at a baby shower or as a gift. So you really didn't care what color the things were. So I wanted it to be a contrasting color. Once I glue this in place, I'm going to be running a tether strap basically from here, because the tether would go under the headrest and then down here. I've modeled the hole that the seatbelt would go through, but I'm probably not going to bother actually snaking a seatbelt through there. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. The reason is as soon as you put that in, you're thinking, oh my god, where's the shoulder belt, which would be coming from up here down through. So I'm thinking I'm probably not going to put that in. And then we also have a booster seat. Once again, I didn't want the colors to match. I wanted them to be contrasting, although I don't think I've ever seen one with red upholstery. And it's going to go right there. So I don't know what the child safety seat laws are in your jurisdiction, and basically this van is from the 1990s anyway. But this type of seat here was basically for what your child went into after they went from the one that's rear facing. And I think the weight was, I don't know, 20 pounds that they could go into this. I don't know. Don't angrily jump into the comments and say, well, you know, it's just a model here, guys. But this is the type that your kid goes into basically when they're starting to toddle. They can walk. They're about 20 odd pounds, 22 pounds, whatever. And some of them do have the big bar that comes over. I thought that was just going to look a little too cumbersome. So this is the simpler type, where there's just kind of the spreader clip that goes in front of the child. And of course, the boosters, I know there are some boosters that have the high back. This is the kind of booster I preferred for my kids, because it's the sort that when they're getting out of the car, they can just grab it and take it along with them and, you know, put it in grandpa's car. As you can see, the child seats are now installed. They're super glued in. And you know what? I did end up reversing the locations, mainly because I'm overthinking it as usual. Notice that this van does not have captain's chairs, which means that if you had this seat in this position, you'd have the shoulder belt and the lap belt continuously going across through that little hole in the base. It would make it almost impossible to get into the rear seat of the van. So I probably would end up putting the toddler seat on this side, so that's what I ended up doing. Like I said, I probably overthought it a little bit. And you can see there's the tether has been installed. And if we come on, focus, there we are. You can see the seat belt, at least the lap belt portion is going inside there. Once again, I'm not going to model the shoulder belt coming up over here, but at least the lap belt attachments are in place there. Remember the cup holders? Well, I have something to put in the cup holders. This is supposed to represent a Tim Hortons coffee cup. This is supposed to represent a McDonald's cup. I know they're not perfect, but I think they'll do the job once I knock them off of this little piece of styrene they're glued to for painting. And there's our drinks installed. And I think they should be plenty visible through the side windows. Final assembly is continuing apace. The wipers have just been pressed into place so far. I'm just going to put a dab of super glue here on the inside. You can see right there to hold them in place. They're fairly decently molded, but the one on the passenger side kind of wants to sit up at an angle a little bit so that it looks like it's kind of floating off of the windshield. So, not sure what the solution to that is, because obviously I don't want to glue it to the actual windshield. I might just bite the bullet and leave it as it is. Just one more overall shot before I do the final assembly and all this gets lost inside forever. Although, should be able to see most of it. I keep thinking of more interior details that I could add. Like, oh, maybe if I put a soccer ball in, maybe a box of Kleenex, maybe a drink box. I'm thinking of all this different stuff. But I think clearly that's overcomplicating things. I could keep adding stuff to the interior of this for weeks. Quite frankly, I thought I was going to have finished this thing final assembly-wise 2 weeks ago, but I just got busy, really tired, other kinds of stuff, and I just didn't get around to it. And really, I don't like a project to stretch out longer than it has to. So my projects take way too long as it is. So there's our final look at the interior without it being encumbered by the body. All right, there we go. It is all done. Mid-90s Dodge Caravan. Finally got all the last little bits done. As a matter of fact, there's probably a few tacky bits of paint left on it. So we'll have some close-up pictures in a moment. All things considered, it went together fairly well. The only thing that's kind of annoying is when you put the body shell down onto the chassis, you can squish it down so it's sitting nice and perfect, and then about an hour later, the whole thing kind of goes a little bit. So, not sure what the solution to that is, because there's not really a good gluing surface I could use to fix it. So, I think it pretty much looks the way I wanted it to. This is a little bit better view here. And you can see the child seats in the back there. And as I roll around here, you knew that was coming. You knew it. You knew that had to be there. So, the tailpipe is a piece of styrene hollowed out and glued onto what was molded on the underside. And just a note, which I just literally noticed but a half hour ago, there's no third brake light, which is a weird thing for them to have left off. So, but then again, I just noticed now. I think tinting the windows was definitely worth it. And if you look in the front windows, and we will in a moment, you can still see the safety seats and things. The license plates I just printed off of the Acme plate maker website that I mentioned in a previous video. Although I think next time I do it, I'm going to print it at a larger size, and then I'm going to photocopy reduce it, because these look a little fuzzy. It's always tough to shoot inside a window, but you can see the McDonald's cup and the Tim Hortons coffee cup down there in the cup holders. So I think that was worth it, seeing as you can see it. And you can just about see, it's easier to see it in real life than on camera. You can see the booster seat there, And if we get down low, we get reflections from the fluorescent lights. There. If we look in this window, we can see the toddler seat right there. So I think they were worth it. I think they certainly give a little bit more animation to the whole thing. Overall, this is not a bad kit, even though it's a snap-together kit. A few things were simplified, obviously. You don't get an engine, and the wheels just go on metal axles. So just to give a little bit of perspective, I've got a late 80s, maybe early 90s Ford Taurus on there. I think I would argue that it's late 80s because the front end hasn't gone squinty yet. So they're not really contemporaries. It's probably about 10 years apart, but they're of the same sort of era. Of course, this is the AMT RoboCop, de-RoboCopized, which means somewhere I've got all those RoboCop parts sitting around. But I think the Caravan, even though it's a snap-together kit, certainly holds up well in comparison to this glue-together kit. Oh, in addition, I did not mention is it didn't come with a rearview mirror, and I got the rearview mirror from one of the Ford Super Duty kits, because obviously I'm not going to build it because I used its chassis for something else. So there is a rearview mirror glued on there. There was a rearview mirror glued on this one until about 10 minutes ago. And the inside was dusty, and I went to undust it, and I knocked it off. So it's rattling around in there somewhere. So I hope you guys enjoyed something very basic and ordinary, a Grand Caravan. And thanks for watching, and until next time, just keep on modeling.